Hello BookTube. For this week's Wednesday video I'm going to be discussing Sand Pebbles from 1966, starring Steve McQueen, Richard McKenna and Richard Attenborough.
Richard Crenna.
Richard Crenna, sorry.
Yeah.
And Candice Bergen, who you can probably see there.
Very young Candice Bergen. She's 1920 in this.
Yeah. And it was directed by Robert Wise. And of course I'm here with Sean still.
Yeah, you might recognise Robert Wise's name if you're a Star Trek fan, because he directed the first the motion picture, but he also directed an iconic science fiction film called The Day the Earth Stood Still, and he also was in the Alps singing the Sound of Music at some point, and lots of other films.
The film is set in China in 1926, and you follow Steve McQueen's character, who is a US Navy engineer. He's posted to a gunboat on the Yangtze River, which is called the USS San Pablo, but it's nicknamed the Sand Pebble, and so the crew are known as the Sand Pebbles. And you follow them as they patrol the river, and you see them having to deal with the local Chinese, where there is the rise of both the nationalist Kuomintang, or KMT, under Chiang Kai-shek, as well as the communists. And you see Steve McQueen's character having to deal with the way the ship is set up, where there are a lot of Chinese workers on there who are doing helping run the ship alongside the crew itself. And he's very protective over the engine, and he likes to do it his way, but he's having to fit in with the way the ship works, with Chinese workers having to help him. And during the course of the film, the situation deteriorates with between the Western powers and the Chinese, and so they end up having to fight with the local Chinese when they have to collect some missionaries, one of whom is Candice Bergen, and is her father, isn't it, the actual missionary herself?
Sorry?
Is it the missionary herself her father? Or
No. She was hired sort of to be a teacher.
Oh, yeah. And so they have to go and collect them, and not to spoil it though, this is a film made nearly well over 50 years ago. It's Steve McQueen's character dies at the end, which I remember you said when we watched it that was very unusual for the time.
Yeah, or well, a lot of films where the sort of hero, the main star, dies at the end. That usually doesn't happen. Yeah. And it's a long film. It's 3 hours. Yeah. And I think there's a version on there too that's about 3.5 hours. Yeah,
it's the roadshow version. The theatrical version which we watched was 183 minutes. The roadshow version is 196 minutes. So, I should say this is based on a book of the same name by Richard McKenna, and he had served in the US Navy, and actually served on one of these Yangtze patrol boats in the 1930s. Now, I think, and the book is actually set in the 30s. Now, I think the reason why they must have changed it to the 20s is partly because the year in which it was being filmed, this is obviously 1966, this is after Mao and the communists were taken over in China, and I think in the original book the Japanese would have been involved, and the idea that you would have that wouldn't be unusual to portray, given obviously you got Pearl Harbor and Tora Tora coming out about a year after this. But I think they changed it to 1926 so that they could I'm trying to think one. Changed it to 1926 so it would fit more with the concerns of the Cold War as opposed to the Second World War. Because in the film there's mention of the Bolsheviks and the communists going to exploit the actions of the Western powers, because there's an incident in the book, in the film, sorry, where the American ship learns that a British ship, Royal Navy ship, has had a confrontation, has been fired on by Chinese forces, and they've replied, they've returned fire, and I think it's 100 and odd British servicemen died, 100 odd Chinese servicemen died, but then the communists reported as thousands of Chinese dying, and so the Americans were ordered not to open fire unless they are fired upon, so they can't give more ammunition to the communists. And that mention of the communists makes you think that this is thinking in the mind of thinking, sort of making people think of 1949, the communists taking over. The idea that the communists could take over China is something that obviously people in 1966 knew because it had done, and also this is right at China had gone through the Great Leap Forward where millions had died, and then they were going through the Cultural Revolution, and that probably in the mind as well. Also, reading about this since watching this, though the book itself was written in 1962, and this character is 66, and people think it's a commentary on the Vietnam War as well, which I don't quite see it, to be honest. I mean,
well, I think any film that was made during that time is going to have some overtones of that, or could have.
Yeah.
But the thing is too, it's kind of a weird thing where, well, it's like, I guess the euphemism is a product of its time, because it's showing 1926, and there's a lot of derogatory terms for the Chinese, and they're looked upon as not, sort of like almost subpar intelligence for sure. But on the other hand, there is sort of respect for them that they're trying to make a living. They're trying to, because they keep talking about there's somebody that you don't shave, that the men don't shave there. They have a barber who does that every morning for them. And Steve McQueen says, no, I like to do it myself. And the character says, well, that's his rice bowl. That's his meal ticket. So you need to do it. So there's that, but at the same time, they'll talk down and derogatory about them. So it's almost as if it's a transitionary sort of period, because they respect them to a certain extent, but not that much. But again, it's going to have the terms that are used for derogatory terms throughout, but it also shows them in a different light. Especially the what's his name, Poe Han, I think. Poe Han, yeah.
I think that might have been partially influenced by the fact that they filmed it on. They filmed part of the film in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Where obviously the regime at the time, it still is there. At the time, it was very much the Kuomintang under Chiang Kai-shek was running it. He ran it from when they arrived there in 49 up until 1975 when he died. But there's still, the Kuomintang is still, I think the main political parties in Taiwan are descended from the Kuomintang, so that sort of balance of trying to show attitude to the period with that sort of more earned respect may have been influenced by the fact they wanted to get on the good side of the regime in Taiwan.
Yeah, but always with these kind of films that people, well, I don't know, like some people don't like him because they're showing the reality of the time, but if you showed anything else, it would be false.
Yeah.
But I think it is a changeover sort of thing, because as I say, there is the respect on the one hand, but it's taken back on the other.
Yeah. One thing the film does do is it does play into that narrative of China as being being a victim of outside forces, which, in terms of the actual history, was a lot more complicated. The Chinese, in what was known as the Century of Humiliation, as much played their own part in their own humiliation as anybody else did, because they refused to modernise, they refused to accept anything Western, in a way that, for example, the Japanese did. The Japanese, sort of the contrast with them in that era of Japanese actually coming to terms with modernity on their own terms and being able to use it to their advantage, where in China they didn't, and they frankly suffered the consequences of not doing that with what they referred to as the Century of Humiliations and the unequal treaties, which does grate a little bit, but not so much to sort of interfere with the enjoyment of the film. Like I say, I think the action scenes were done quite well.
Yeah. Like the only thing there's to me a little bit of a bumpy road where after they pick up Candice Bergen in the other one, and then there's sort of like the love scene and stuff like that. Yeah. There's really an abrupt change.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the way Robert Wise wanted it. But there's just an abrupt change from that, and then it just sort of goes slow a little bit. Where Richard Attenborough's character marries a Chinese woman. I use quotation marks because they weren't legally able to do it.
So. I just discovered something about the actress who played the Chinese Richard Attenborough's wife, quote unquote. That was the woman who wrote Emmanuel.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which I was surprised by. I gotta say, I think I must have seen the Roadshow version before, because I seem to remember a scene of Richard Attenborough running along the running to get on the ship, being followed by a group of angry Chinese protesters. That was at some point, and I don't remember that being. This wasn't in that version, so. But the action scenes at the end are really good. They have to the gunboat has to find its way up the river to the missionary place, and there's the Chinese have got a set of ships connected with a rope to stop as a what's it called, a boom, sorry, across the river, and so they have to attack one of the ships, board one of these boats, and defend it so they can cut the wire and let the ship through, and that's really well done. Interestingly, one of the people that Steve McQueen kills on that on the boat when they're trying to do the boom is, I think, the Chinese barber.
Well, there's the student of Candice Bergen's that he kills, the last one. Yeah. Before he jumps back on his ship, he kills the student, and these things, like there you can see certain things really affecting
Steve McQueen's character.
Yeah, because you start out with him being sort of just wanting an easy life. He just doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't like being told what to do. He doesn't like the hierarchy. He doesn't want to move up. He doesn't want to command or anything like that. He just wants to an engine that he can work with. Yeah. And then it doesn't quite work out here. But then under his watch, a Chinese man dies when they're trying to fix the engine, and then he doesn't, like, he's ordered to teach another Chinese person to take over sort of the other the other Chinese workers in the engine room, and he doesn't think he can, but he gets close to Pohan. And then it's never made really clear why he was, like, the head of the Chinese people on the boat, or the workers on the boat, sends Pohan off the ship, and then he gets caught and tortured in front of everybody, and then Steve McQueen has to, well, he doesn't have to, but he puts him out of his misery. Yeah. And I think that's all that kind of thing, because he, with getting close with Candice Bergen as well, or her character, it leads up, I think, to the end, because he's the way the character was, then he's not going to be able to live with himself, so it's almost he's committing suicide at the end, but for a reason. Yeah.
There is a really good scene where Richard Attenborough's wife is Richard Attenborough that over winter the boat has to stay anchored outside of town, and the hostility is increasing, and so the crew are told not to go ashore, except one of them can go across with the mail to collect the mail. And Richard Attenborough's character has been swimming across to the town to be with his wife. He then dies, and when Steve McQueen goes over there on the mail run, he finds him and discovers this, and then returns to the ship after having a fight with a couple of Chinese people who live in the tenement place where Attenborough's wife is. And then I think a day later, the Chinese demand Steve McQueen's character be arrested because they're accusing him of killing Richard Attenborough's wife.
Yeah.
And then the Chinese are threatening to attack, and the crew turn on Steve McQueen's character, demanding that the captain hand him over, and the men won't open fire. And it makes the captain having to take a machine gun and open fire. And then there's a scene later on where the captain, it looks like he's going to try and take his own life.
Yeah.
And until then, he gets discovered that Nanking, there's been an event in Nanking, which was then the Chinese capital, which means that effectively that they're in a situation of undeclared war, and so he can act, and that sort of gets him, sort of stimulates him.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is too, because he, like with Steve McQueen's character, because when he does go with the mail and he goes to see Richard Attenborough, he was going to jump ship.
Yeah.
And he wanted them to come with him to go up to the mission place, but because Richard Attenborough's death, and I think because he it's like everybody he got close to.
Yeah.
And it's just a well written character, and Steve sorry, I'm gonna sneeze here. Steve McQueen's character Steve McQueen can play these subtle parts, because there's a really great scene near the beginning where he's going to his ship, and he's on another boat, and he meets Candice Bergen, and she's just arriving as well, and they're talking on the deck at the rail, and it's a beautiful awkward scene, and it's so naturally awkward, because I remember somebody else seeing that at the same when I've seen it a few times, and somebody saying, "Oh, that's bad acting," and it's like, no. It's beautiful acting, because they are awkward together, and it's just it's well thought out how natural the awkwardness is.
So I would recommend anybody see it. It's a really good film, and very much one not to miss if you get a chance. I've seen it occasionally repeated on British TV, usually on ITV. So you may well see it on ITV4 if you're in the UK and you've got a free few blocks. You should be able to see it on there occasionally. So
I doubt anymore though, because of the language and stuff like that. They would have to cut all that out or bleep
or give a
certain derogatives.
Or give a warning beforehand. But as I say, if you get a chance to see it, do. It's really good. I'll see you next week.